Okay, Adam Puskorius. I want to start today's episode with just some gymnastics for our mind to get in a good flow state. And
Dig it.
so I'm going to think about when I hear your name or I visualize your face, what do I think of? What images conjure up in my head? So obviously, I think of a man that knows his way around the kitchen, a master chef, dare I say,
All right.
uh, an artisan. You're just absolutely talented. You've cooked for me and my family some of the best meals we've ever had. I think that also speaks to your love language for food. And it's my same love language, which is to share and to eat in a really special communal setting. I really admire that. You have set those intentions and integrated that culture into your family dynamics. And then when I also think of Adam Puskorius, I think of a hunter, I think of a gardener, I think of a florist. You brought these beautiful flowers today that we have in the studio.
Yes, sir.
Love it. And then an amateur biodynamic aspiring practitioner
Very amateur.
like myself. And then the last thing, when I really just focus on your last name, Puskorius, I think of some kind of dinosaur from the Jurassic period that's yet to be unearthed.
That's funny. You know why that's funny? That's how I met my wife. Yeah.
You gotta explain that.
Yeah. So she was actually a waitress at a place we were hanging out at. And as my young chef vibe was going, I handed her my business card to come see me. And she looked at the card and she's like, "Your last name sounds like a dinosaur." So that's
There you go.
funny. It all nails. So that's great. Yeah.
Puskorisaurus.
Yeah.
It's like the apex predator, bigger than Acthrocanthosaurus and T-Rex.
That's funny.
So you also have 25 years of experience in the restaurant
Yep.
industry. You're the executive chef at True Foods Kitchen.
Yes, sir.
And as I was like just riffing on all the things I think of with you, what did I miss?
Nothing, man. Family man, I guess.
Yes,
I
sir.
don't know. I love my family. Love being outdoors, those kind of things. So I think you nailed it. And hey, man, going back at you, much love. Really getting to know you has been great. I love the way you operate, the way your brain works. So I'm excited to kind of get into this with you, man.
Yeah, well, this is going to be great. I'd say the one thing that I love that you're always into, and as I think about you, is maybe in a previous life you might have been a librarian too,
A librarian.
because you're always giving me awesome books.
Yeah, that was from my upbringing with just really good chefs, just always handing me books.
Yeah,
Stuck with me, and now I have millions and millions of books, and I love to share them. And I know you're into biodynamics, and that's kind of you and I are just on that page together.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so the intention for today's podcast is, as you know, this is a 3-part series about hunting and kind of diving into some deeper stories, some untold stories, celebrating these tales, these animals, the gifts that they give us. This is really exciting. This is episode number 3 of that series where we're going to really dive into, obviously, the culinary side of things. And so
Cool.
that's why you're here. And I'm going to start off with a topic that just boils my blood. I think it's a trigger topic for you too.
Yeah.
And that is if you're just having a good conversation with someone and you're getting to know them, and then the conversation drifts to like eating bison or elk or pronghorn or deer. And then the reaction of that other individual is like, oh, that's gamey. Like,
Right.
gamey, I put air quotes. But you could also interchange that with something like tough,
Right.
inedible,
Right.
which that's just straight up fighting words.
Yeah, I agree.
And so why can you please explain the kind of the flavor dynamics of wild game and how it compares to what, we're more used to, which is farmed animals?
Yeah. In my opinion, I think wild game is what meat should taste like, right? That nutrient dense. I like a little chew to my meat. This factory farmed and what they're eating. They are pretty much eating sick animals, in my opinion, right? I went through the whole steakhouse vibe and ran a lot of really good restaurants, and it all was finished on corn. And it was a lot of soft tenderloins hitting the plates and hitting the dining room all the time. That was the number one seller. So I think that's just what people like. In my opinion, it's just what they eat. And these animals are older, right? So I think the average deer that shot is like 7 years old, right? So which is older animal out there running from predators, so those muscles are just tighter, there's more blood flowing through them. So I just think it gives it that gamier taste. Not gamier, but just the way it should taste.
Yeah.
But I really do enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm down with that.
Yeah.
I think of it as, just being more of how meat has tasted for 200,000 years.
Right.
meat in its purest form. And a friend of ours, Kate Kavanaugh, she really put it well when she said these older, more wild animals, they have evolved to use their bodies,
Right.
whereas domesticated animals typically not. That's not the case. And so these animals that are out in nature expressing themselves, moving around, running, it's that circulation of blood through the system that is fixing nutrients, fixing minerals to the meat. And like
Right.
you said, they have longer lifespans. And so, well, that should be something that's celebrated. It's like
A
the meat
hundred
has
percent.
flavor. The meat is an expression of the environment and the animal.
That's the kind of meat I want to be cooking for my family, my friends, what I want my cooler full of,
No doubt, man.
100%.
So, what is it about our culture that is, shifted from wild game meat to farm meat?
Um, Convenience, obviously. I just think that people are not tied to just all of food in general, right? Walking into a shopping market and buying things that are packaged and all that stuff comes with that. So I think that's just what they're used to. And what the farmed animals are eating, right? They're not getting finished on grass. They're not eating wild berries and twigs and things that they're supposed to be eating. So I don't understand how the culture shifted so much. I mean, I know it's factory farming and the money behind it and what's going on with that,
Yep.
but it's disappointing.
It's almost like a dumbing down or a degrading of our palate
Right.
and
And
our
it goes
senses.
across the whole, culinary culture.
Yep.
It's ridiculous.
And we're so disconnected from the flavors of wild game that we don't even know how to articulate how it tastes,
Right.
right? Like we say gamey, which is so weird because it's like you're using a noun, which is like the game, the deer, saying, how does it taste? And you're
Right.
saying it tastes deary or gamey. Like
Dude,
it's just so, like
this
if you did
tastes
that.
real bory.
Yeah, it's so lame. It's
Right.
like if you did that with wine and one of those sommelier
Yeah.
dudes heard you say, "Oh, this wine is very winey," they
Yeah.
would just shit their pants
Right.
immediately.
Right. Right. Right.
And
Not the
so
terroir part and everything where it's grown and where the animals living and things like that.
exactly. And your idea about convenience being a driving factor to where we kind of have like shifted our palate towards modern farm meat, I think that's really interesting. And there's this quote by Aldo Leopold where he just says like the modern dogma is convenience.
100%.
And I think convenience is a really, I think you're being polite, but I think in a way you could say it's just laziness.
Very lazy, being in the restaurant business and seeing what's going on, to go and DoorDash and Uber Eats is higher than I've ever seen. It's doubled since COVID. So it's pretty wild.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's nuts. And, like when I think about all these factors driving farmed meat and kind of changing, shifting our palate, I have to think that the inputs in the factory model. So, like when you go to the grocery store, you go to your restaurant, and you're buying like a domesticated animal, like a beef cow or a sheep or a goat or a chicken.
Right.
Chicken's a really great example.
100%.
Those animals are so highly controlled, and how they're raised is so mechanized that like all of their inputs are accounted for. The amount of daylight they get is accounted for. The amount of activity they get. A lot of times the genetics are changed to express themselves in a way that they grow really fast, really cheaply.
Right.
And so like we're just losing all this, and we're losing all this knowledge in this relationship to these animals.
And it's so sad, right? Knowing that these animals, that's the lives they're living. And some of them don't even see sunlight, which is just very, very, very sad. And I can't even think about just the impact that it has on that creature and just, not even being tapped in the source anymore. It's I don't know. Not a big fan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it's like the disconnection to people and their sources of food that allows that to exist.
Right.
Because you're like, how could that even be? How could someone ever volunteer to eat a chicken that was raised in a barn, never had sunlight on its body?
Right.
And you say, oh, that's messed up. I would never do that. But the fact is, if you're like buying industrial chicken, you're probably doing that.
And you're eating it and you are what you eat, right? So it goes to that.
Absolutely. So if we look at kind of production farming, and we're going to get to the good stuff, which is like the wild game. That's why we're here.
Right.
But we just need to get our grounding, a good foundational base.
Yeah.
And so when we look at this and we look at all the inputs that control these animals, just kind of want to riff on some of the inputs that I see or the variables I see controlled and how that changes the eating experience for an end consumer or the animal
Yeah.
itself. So, first of all, you kind of touched on the age of an animal,
Right.
but maybe just to kind of reiterate how a young animal might eat compared to an older animal. Let's start there.
Yeah, I mean, flavor, obviously, right? I always look at it as, I like an older animal because I just feel like it has more nutrients in it, more life to it. Um, so I'm a big fan of that. Younger animals that don't get to eat wild things that they're supposed to. Um, it's just not the same flavor profile. Like you can just look at the different colors of meat and tell if it's been factory farmed or, if it's grass fed, grass finished. So, um, you know,
Yes.
yeah,
A good example of that maybe that I think of is like lamb
yep,
versus an older sheep.
right.
Call it mutton.
Mutton,
That's not necessarily the most flavor salivating provoking term word, but yeah, like I mean like the complexity of an older sheep is just it's like a different species.
it really is.
Can't even account for it. But yeah, like a lamb is what under is it 12 months or
It's pretty
something
young.
like that?
Yeah. I mean, if you really dig into all the animals, it's pretty sad to think about, chickens being 3, 4 weeks old,
Yeah.
and it's, it's disappointing.
So it's actually really hard to purchase or to find meat from an older, more seasoned animal in the commercial meat industry.
I think so. I mean, I think it just goes back to the cost of raising an animal, right? Like having them on your land for 7 years. Like, what's that costing you by the time it gets processed and hits the plate? Are they making any money off that for all the feed it's intaking? And I mean, maybe because it's just a bunch of crap, but
Yeah.
who knows?
So maybe this is one window into hunting if you're just even curious what the flavor of a more seasoned older animal what that experience would be like.
Right, for sure.
That's an access point. So let's next talk about the sex of an animal. Male, female. How are your thoughts there? Even if you're like
Um,
hunting.
you know, I like to shoot a male animal. Obviously they have that more, wild taste to it, due to them having testicles, with deers, like all those hormones it's producing to grow antlers just kind of makes it a little bit more tough and more gamey. So, a doe or something like that's going to eat a little bit better. We go nilgai hunting every year, and it's a half split between the crew. Some are doing males, some are bulls, and some are doing cows. And that's the flavor that we like. But we all share and go after it. But
Yeah.
I've always been after the males.
That's cool, man.
Yeah,
I was trying to pull up a picture really quick about some castrated beef cattle
yeah,
because that's like a common practice
right,
in factory farming. Like a young animal, to your point, removing the testicles to control the production of testosterone.
yeah,
That impacts the actual pH of the meat, which impacts the tenderness,
the flavor, and all of it.
flavor. Yeah, it
Yeah.
impacts like how that meat is rated and graded.
Mm-hmm.
So it's common practice to castrate an animal,
Yep.
just chop its freaking nuts off. And this like if you start looking at side by side images of like these can be brother cows, like brother steers or a bull and a steer. So
Right.
bull has its balls intact and the steer doesn't. Like they were born the same time. And after 1 year of life, it looks like, the castrated one is just this like Bill Gates weird
That's exactly what my brain
unathletic,
went to.
yeah, physical, just piece of slop, and then the other one is like,
Yeah.
I don't know, like
Just a
Sean Baker or
there
something,
you go.
like some just totally jacked dude. And
Right.
so, yeah, when you see that, you're like, huh,
Which
what,
one do I want to eat?
yeah, what life force do I want to put into my body
Uh,
to transfer that life force and that energy? And so maybe the one exception is you've heard of boar taint.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a thing, I guess. They'll say, well, pigs are different.
Pigs are different.
Yeah. Have
Yeah.
you ever consumed an older pig with its balls intact?
I've had a lot of wild boar through people kind of giving it to me, and you can definitely tell the difference.
Yep.
You know.
So that boar taint, testosterone,
Yeah.
it's actual like a flavor deal.
It is, but it's just like, you look at weight and different sizes of animals, and it's just you cook them differently, right? Not all animals are created equally,
Yeah.
so you just got to approach them differently. And I think that's just knowledge and spending some time knowing what you're getting into and what you're killing or eating and knowing how to cook that stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One example that comes to my mind is we were night hunting at the ranch one time, and we were pig hunting. And this was before we spotlighted. We had like this really old school thermal that sucked, and you couldn't tell if an animal was 100 yards away or 10 feet away. And there was a pig, and we shot it, and it was 10 feet away, but we thought it was a big boar at 100 yards. And we got up to it, and it was a suckling pig.
Oh,
This little baby was
yeah, yeah.
still just like milk was all over its face. And we didn't know what to do with it, so we put it in a like a crock pot, like a
Right.
cast iron crock
Yeah.
pot, slow cooked it overnight in some broth. And dude, okay, so we're talking young animal.
Yeah.
Sex probably didn't matter, but the age class did. That was the best, fattiest meat I've ever had in my
Oh,
life.
dude. Yeah, I agree. No.
So
Baby pigs, good stuff.
it's the best.
Yeah, I agree. And you could just do them whole, and it's not going to take you 15 hours to get that thing cooked. But yeah, I'm a big fan of suckling pig.
Nice. Um, it feels like weird eating a baby, anything, but
It does.
until you eat one, you're like, yeah, I'm never going back.
I mean, like you said, it was your scope, right?
That's all that Katie, my
Yeah,
wife, actually
yeah.
requests now.
But I look at it like, I mean, if you're gonna shoot it, you want it to die faster anyways. If they're running around and get back to flavor of meat, it's like if you don't hit it right and it's running around, it's all stressed out. It's gonna be a tough pig to taste delicious, There's gonna be a lot more work that goes into that thing.
Absolutely. So you spoke a little bit about like the terroir of meat, but yeah, talk a little bit about how like the regionality of the animal could impact flavor. And
Yeah.
maybe even what terroir is for people who don't know.
I mean, I don't know the exact description, but just kind of where things grow. If you look at wine, you talk about, different wine flavors in a dry climate where like say in Napa, that fog flies in every morning, it just sits on those grapes and it's just a different flavor profile. So, getting back to animals, I've had meat from everywhere working in restaurants and some of these grass-fed, grass-finished cows out in like Tasmania with like the best grass in the world, you could tell the difference.
Absolutely.
100%. You know what I mean? And then you get into Texas where, you shoot a deer in the beginning of November and it's a little bit different, right? It hasn't been having all those grasses because nothing's growing. So you can tell the flavor difference.
That is really cool. I think that's something we could probably teach ourselves too.
Yeah.
If like a sommelier wine guru can like sip wine and know what region of the freaking planet it comes
Right.
from, like that's in the meat. We just aren't paying attention to that,
I agree.
which is I think a little bit of a desecration. So when we talk about season and kind of like locally eating, that's really hot and trendy in especially like the restaurant
Right.
community and industry and foodies alike. But I feel like they're always like the focus when you talk about seasonal eating, it's always on plants.
Plants.
But like, where's the place for a chef to really think about the locally seasonally available meats and how to celebrate that? How does that fit into the equation?
I mean, we're all about it, right? I mean, not only does it reduce the footprint of animals traveling in cars and whatever, however it gets to your plate. I think it starts there. I think we all need to eat more locally and seasonally. I mean, here in Central Texas, like we're super close to the coast. We can catch really badass fish, some of the best shrimp in the world, right? Like when I lived in Chicago, we were still getting our shrimp from the Gulf of Mexico. It's the best shrimp in the world, right? And I think it goes with the animals we have now too. And Texas is cool because we have some exotics that have just kind of ended up here and are here now. So I think there's a lot of ways to get excited about it. And you go to the farmers market now and 10 years ago, it wasn't the same. It was like, it's hard to find things. People were trying to like figure it out. There was like one grass finished guy over there, and you would kind of try to support. But now all these people are kind of into it and are using the land and understanding like what it takes to raise these animals on that land. And it's good. In my opinion, it's really good.
Yep.
So I think there's a lot to get excited about.
Yeah, I think to your point, like the deer, for an example, like these wild animals, they know what wild grasses and forbs and legumes to eat for certain reasons.
Right.
Like they still have that intact evolutionary knowledge and that wisdom. So they're like every bite is not just by accident. It's
No.
very planned, very meticulous, and so they're putting the nutrients in their bodies that their bodies need. They're finding them. Whereas, like we've already kind of discussed with domesticated animals, a lot of time they are just those instincts have been bred out of them,
Right.
or they're fed one single species of grass. And so, yeah, I do think there's something to the different times of years when the different plants are growing. You get those different flavor profiles, and probably one of the most well known examples, like hunting bear when all the mountain blueberries are in
Right. The
full bloom.
blueberry bear, right? The Ranella thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude. I mean, it sounds amazing.
Right.
And it makes a lot of sense, right?
Makes
I mean, it reminds me of a story. We serve sea buckthorn, right? It's this fruit that grows. I don't even know where it's from. I should know. But the story that comes with it is like Alexander the Great, when he was conquering the world, those guys were all super tired and just kind of beat up. And one day, all their horses came back, and they all had these orange mouths, and they were just like, just fucking ready to go. And so he had a bright idea of just to follow them where they went. And the sea buckthorn ended up bringing like their crew, their army back with energy.
Oh,
And
nice.
it was like, it's part of like how he conquered was these berries. So
That's
that's kind of
great.
cool.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
like the wisdom of the animal
Yeah, right?
guided the human.
I think we should look more into that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's that creature over there eating?
Exactly.
Maybe I should eat it too.
Or look at that cactus, right? It grows all the time, in this hot, hot weather. Like I love Nepalese, right? And it's just like looking at that plant and seeing it survive, it's something I want to eat.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Is the survivability of different food resources. And in this part of Texas, central Texas, I mean, 90% of Texas is like this semi-arid environment where, man, it's been like 60 plus days, over 100 degrees. We're not
I think
getting
we're up to
any
90
rain.
now, but yeah.
Yeah, it's bananas.
It's
like
bananas.
no rain. And so, if you're like, okay, I want to eat locally, I want to eat seasonally. How did like the pioneers in the 1800s survive out here?
Right.
They weren't surviving off of like monocultures of vegetables.
No. And they were
that's-
getting them shipped across the country.
yeah, I mean, especially if there was no irrigation.
100%.
And so it's like, okay, well then what is the true essence of eating locally in like a semi-arid environment or a grassland or savanna? And it's like the animals, the ruminants that are converting that solar energy into food. Like the indigenous knew this.
Right.
Pioneers knew it.
Right.
And so I think like for us to truly eat locally, and this is 90% of Texas, this is semi-arid regions. This is like, I think 70% of all land globally, right? And so it's like, hey, wake up. These animals are gifts. Like
Yeah.
this is the true expression of what
They
seasonal
have the
eating
knowledge.
is.
It's been passed down.
Absolutely, without doubt. And so even kind of thinking about, again, plants, especially
Mm.
wild plants, kind of like being more celebrated sometimes than the animal counterparts in
Yeah.
nature. There's like a lot of excitement where people talk about the medicinal value of plants.
Mhm.
And like I just wonder, like, well, what's the medicinal value of wild animals? If we're talking about like wild plants, there's got to be something there.
Right. I don't know all the specifics of it all, but I mean, you look at an animal as you break it down and talking about like hearts and livers and all the nutrients that go in that. I mean, it's all there. You could survive off that stuff. You don't even
Yes.
need plants, in my opinion. It's good to have. Big fan of them. I love growing them.
Mhm.
All
That's
that
true.
stuff. So
I know you love growing them and cooking them.
yeah,
Yeah, you're very omnivorish. The plants, like for me, the medicinal value of them, a lot of times it's going to be like that hormesis.
Yeah.
Where like at a very low dose,
yeah,
it's just like it provides some kind of needed stimulus for your body to where there's like a little bit of a reaction and your body like compensates and
right,
and reacts back, and then you get this like health benefit. So
100%.
but if you eat too much of that plant,
Yeah,
that's not good. You're probably going to get sick or
Yeah.
shit your pants or die.
yeah. And those plants are just trying to survive, just like everything else is.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, that big bag of okra I brought you today. I was so itchy after digging into those big 9-foot tall plants, and it's like they
Absolutely.
didn't want me to pick it, but
So,
here
so
we
that's
are.
that
Yeah.
plant defense
Yeah.
mechanism.
But that okra's got a lot of protein and a lot
Absolutely.
of vitamin D from all the sun. So
Yeah.
I love that stuff.
So like if the plants have this hormetic ability to help give us medicinal properties, and then like you were saying, I think the organ meats are like the most nutrient dense
For
parts
sure.
of the animal, but there's also like that idea of like life force supports life force. So and it's more documented than this. It's like the antioxidants in eating a heart of a wild animal happen to be the same antioxidants that promote heart health in you as
Right.
the consumer, and it goes like with all these organs,
It's crazy.
which is so neat.
I know. And I just feel that we all need to dig into that more. A lot of that stuff goes to waste, and it's so good for you, so good for brain development. And I'm a big fan of trying to sneak it into my kids' food.
Oh,
Help
yeah.
them grow, get
How do you
strong.
sneak it into your kids' food?
You know, chili, soups, tacos, the easy stuff. Um, Quesadillas, whatever I can do.
Just,
Right.
like, dice up a heart and throw it in there
Yeah.
or grind it
Yeah,
or
yeah. That last Neil guy we shot, we made like a little ceviche with it, which is really cool. We did like a pico de gallo and some chunks of avocado, some nice corn chips, sea salt.
Yeah.
And she saw me making it and she was like, I want to try it. I said, hell yeah, let's go. Um, so I think, even being open with the kids and just cooking with them opens their eyes and they want to be involved. And, you know, she loves eating everything I kill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go, little Addie.
Yeah.
Um, so when we look at, that end of life transition, so an animal living its best
Hmm.
animal life, then transitioning into death, how does like how does that impact flavor? So like the juxtaposition is your factory farmed animal getting put on a trailer, being transported hundreds of miles in some circumstance, very stressful, then unloaded from the trailer. They're off the land they know is home. Their food resources gone. They're like on the highway driving 80 miles an hour. It's
Yeah.
like,
Already stressed.
yeah, it's a horrible end of life. And then they're unloaded in some kind of pen confinement. There's like artificial lights, crazy loud noises. I mean, it sucks. It's like not a
Big
good
time.
end of life.
Yeah.
But then to the juxtaposition where it's like that wild animal that you're hunting, say a deer, and it has a very quick. Well, we'll let Morgan ruin the shot.
What's up to Morgan?
So that deer that has this just like really peaceful end of life, zero stress. It's just like very quick transition. How does that impact flavor or texture, or does it?
I mean, it does 100%, that stress just shoots into the meat and makes it super tough. That's why that shot is very important. I mean, the last deer I shot was like picking berries out of a tree, and I hit it and it fell and it was amazing. Um, it's sad, but that's where it all starts. It's like, once it's down, then the real work really starts,
Yeah,
right? But I think it's so important for them to be comfortable. And even with, the way people are doing farming the right way, these animals are dying a better life, are, you know, becoming that transition is a lot easier for them, which definitely you can tell in the food,
yeah,
you know?
like a field harvest or something
Yes,
like that,
for
where
sure.
animals' life is transition
Right.
on the property. Yeah, it's for sure a higher
Well,
level
they're
of.
home, they've got their friends around, eating what they want to eat,
Yeah,
I think that's great.
yeah. When you said that, when you talked about that last deer you shot eating out of a berry tree, maybe it's a persimmon tree, I'm imagining, but it's like
Just
that's
picking
how
away.
I wanna go.
Yeah,
I mean, it's gonna happen. I'm not
yeah,
gonna be here forever.
no,
You're not gonna be here forever. So, like, what if we could choose to be
right.
just peacefully, like, in such a
Like in my
flow
garden
state?
and all that.
Yeah. That's the and then
Yeah,
you transition. I mean, that
yeah,
sounds
better
really
than
nice.
being in a prison, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, exactly. Prison hospital.
I know,
That would
dude.
be like the
Oh
factory model.
god.
So let's talk about now let's get into, like, some serious hunting stuff and some, etiquette, best practices, maybe some common mistakes, things that people should avoid, pay attention to. So things in your experience, let's just walk through the whole process from, like you're transitioning that animal into death. And that's kind of like the middle of the story because there's a lot that happens before that.
Yeah,
And
all the buildup, getting
yep,
out there, the gear, I mean, driving,
planning,
all of it, right?
no doubt.
Sleeping in somewhere you don't want to sleep.
Yeah, that's a part of the
Yeah,
story.
100%.
And then you have your animal that you harvested, and then it's like you have the next chapter.
Right.
And so let's kind of just walk step by step. So you did talk about the placement of the shot.
Yeah.
Um, where like what is typically kind of placement wise? What do you like to shoot for with like a pig or deer or an elk?
I mean, pig, if you can get a good headshot, I think it's a good for it, right? In my opinion. But I mean, just that shoulder right below it. Trying to just get through the lungs or the heart or somewhere.
Right.
Just to drop it. I haven't been hunting my whole life. I just picked it up 5 years ago. Always fished and did things like that. Didn't have a dad growing up, so but what I've seen that's worked for us is, making sure the shot's great, letting it relax, give it some time, right? Don't let it jump up and run away. Let it die peacefully. You don't run up on that thing. Let it have its time.
Yeah,
Let it breathe out those last breaths. And if you can be around within, 20 yards or so and be present for it, I think it's great. Helps the animal transition, in my opinion,
sure.
because we're all there trying to make it, like, I don't know, it's sad to watch it all happen. And then to the point, it's like, I don't know, I think getting the guts out immediately is important because it cools the animal down, right? And then I feel like, you know, having it hang, keeping it cold and dry is the most important thing, right?
Sure.
You don't want to just skin this thing and throw it in a cooler full of water and ice.
Yeah.
All that'll just get into that meat.
Oh, that's the worst,
It's
man.
the worst,
Yeah,
right?
I don't know where that belief started that that was the way to do it. Maybe it's
It's
just
crazy,
like a
man.
food safety thing, like, you gotta chill the carcass as fast as possible.
Right, right.
But, yeah, to your point, I don't even know if hopefully this isn't people don't know about this, but there's this idea of what you're explaining, putting a deer or another animal in a
Right.
carcass with ice, sometimes water,
Mhm.
and that's no good.
It's no good. No, I mean, water carries bacteria, which is one thing, right? So it doesn't help anything.
Oh, no.
But not only that, that meat sucks all that water in. I've seen ice water cook meat before.
Oh,
You know what I mean? It
gross.
just gets like this grayish color to it, and it gets real tender, or not tender, real tough.
Yep.
And it almost ruins the animal, right?
Yeah.
And then once you're breaking that thing down, like having it on the cutting board and trying to get after it when it's wet and slimy, it's moving around on you. It's constantly pouring out water. And then once you get into the grind part, like you're in another position, right? Because when you're grinding, you want it to be super cold. You want it to freeze.
Yep.
So if you're going to freeze this meat that already has water in it, what's it doing to the cells of that meat, right? Is it, it's going to leach out. So then once you get it into a sausage casing or whatever you're doing with it, or a frying pan, all that stuff comes out of it.
Yeah, it's
So
gonna
I
be
think,
slimy.
yeah, dry, cold.
Yeah.
That's the way to go.
That's really helpful. So to get it, like I think the best circumstances you're like hunting on a cool fall or like winter day, and
Oh yeah.
there's like a 35 to 40-degree window at
Yeah.
night. You
Anything
just
below 40,
hang it
you're good.
outside,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But if you don't have that, what are the other options to like chill your animal down quick?
I mean, you could break it down into big enough pieces where it fits in your Yeti or whatever cooler you have. Wrap that thing really good. Trash bags, whatever. And then keep it on ice where it's not right on there, like the skin or the meat's not touching the water in the ice. And then have that cooler with the plug open, just draining, so it doesn't seep in there because it's gonna find water finds a way anywhere, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the best route to go. And if you keep it cold and dry like that, like it can last in that cooler for 3, 4, 5 days,
Yeah.
and then you can still get it out and have some fun with it when you're butchering it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, man, I didn't want to overlook it. I think it's important, but like you kind of just touched on the emotional part of that whole experience. Is that
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot. It's overwhelming, right?
It's overwhelming because you're like super excited. Your heart's going 100 miles per hour. At least mine is when I'm about to
Yeah.
pull the trigger. And then next thing you know, it's like animals down, and you want to kind of shift the way you are thinking and be present with that animal as it transitions. Um,
Exactly.
you know, it's
It's like a roller coaster.
it, it's it's a roller coaster.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah,
how can you be like sad and on the brink of crying, but also so happy,
yeah, it's a lot.
simultaneously being so grateful?
Yeah, and you might
Um,
be deaf too from the gunshot, so there might be a lot going on, right?
yeah, totally. But I think kind of like even skipping back, like giving that sacred time for that animal to transition, like you'd mentioned, like chill out, don't get up in its face, because
No.
yeah, that it doesn't want to see you by its side in its last moments of life.
Side eyeing you as it's bleeding out. No,
Yeah, like
man.
there's the apex predator.
Right.
No, I don't think so either. And is there anything typical, like, do you like to like say a prayer or kind of like take a moment
I
to
mean, obviously, like the blood's important to me. I know it's weird, and there's just so many stories on how you do it or whatever you do, and it just goes way, 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 way back, and a little bit on the face, a little bit in the mouth, and I feel like you show your appreciation and sit there with the animal for a minute, right, before you start snapping photos or whatever you're doing with it. Um, I don't
yeah.
know. Yeah.
I think everyone's experience there is different.
Right.
And
And they all don't go perfect.
yeah, exactly. But it's like the intention. And I think there's a lesson to learn in when that doesn't go perfect.
Right.
So like when you have a shitty shot or you have a good shot and the animal is still like these are just amazing creatures that I mean, I've seen it before, like double lung shot and it can still run 100 yards before
For
it
sure.
falls. And you're like, that was the speed of lightning.
Right.
It's gonna take me 2 hours to find that.
Right.
It's amazing.
It's crazy. It is. I mean, it just shows how powerful they are.
Yeah.
It's the kind of food I want to eat.
Exactly. No, that's the food I want to eat, the food I want to feed my family. So okay, so now we're kind of like talk through a lot of the steps, and now we get to this one that I feel like is a little bit of a controversial, heated topic, but aging. So what is aging, and maybe like why is it important for a wild animal?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like aging and hanging, definitely want to get all that blood out of there. You get your wet age and you get your dry age. It helps break down enzymes, tenderizes the meat a little bit. All that stuff that comes with it. With dry aging, it's actually like drying it out, and these enzymes are breaking down the muscles and making it tender. So there's a lot that goes behind it.
Are you a dry age guy or a wet age guy?
I'm dry age, but not the 240-day you're talking about. I've had it where it's been funky. I
What
don't.
is funky? Like what does a very long dry aged animal taste like?
I've had some that have been a little furry that we cut off, and then putting in your mouth, it was immediately blue cheese in my head, right? Um, so it just depends. Everybody's palate's different, and it's good, right? It's delicious. Do I want to eat 8 ounces of it? No, but I'll take a bite,
Sure.
right? But if it goes 40 to 50 days, I think you're there.
Yep.
It's perfect, and you're not wasting a lot because with dry aging comes, it's losing moisture and it's just naturally drying out. So when you go to eat it, if it's gone too long, you're cutting a lot off,
Yep.
right? So I'm not a big
Absolutely.
fan of waste.
So I can like dry age hang an animal in a cooler, a walk-in cooler.
Right.
That's easy peasy. But if you just are like on your first hunt and you're bringing the animal home in a cooler, how do you get that some of that dry aging effect at home?
I mean, what I've done is just in the cooler in my refrigerator a little bit, right? But I think the most important part is there's things you can eat when you harvest, right? And I know we're probably going to be talking about that. But I feel like it's important for it to sit a couple days, let it bleed out. So that's just what's worked best for me.
Yeah. So I like how you do it in your cooler, not in your refrigerator.
Huh?
You do that whole process that
Yeah.
couple days in your
Yeah, yeah,
cooler.
yeah. The wife doesn't want
I
that
was
to.
gonna say
Yeah, yeah.
that would be a pretty boss move of your wife
We don't want that dripping on the blueberries,
to
right?
be cool with that, or if you have your own devoted cooler,
Right.
which I have seen some people
Well, I
do.
mean, I like I said, I've been in a lot of kitchens, and we've done some projects and trying some things, and it gets funky, right? I don't want that in my cooler.
Yep.
Yeah.
The I've tried grinding meat the day of a harvest, and it is just not right. It
No.
does not turn out right. It's not firm enough. It has too much moisture.
Right.
And then it just kind of turns into like this weird paste
Mm-hmm.
that it's so sticky. Like it's kind of like you could eat it in spaghetti, but it's
Right.
almost like eating cat food.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like everything tends to get a little bit better with certain degrees of aging. Like stuff you're going to grind, you don't need to grind it for or you don't need to age it for 40
No.
days. These are
No.
maybe your prime cut
You
you're
want to
talking
lose that
about.
moisture out, right? And like it goes back to what we were talking about, because you want to grind when it's super cold,
Yep.
right? Because that metal heats up and it just starts kind of heating that meat up and the fat, and it just, like you said, turns into this pasty thing. So I think the less moisture in there is better, but not going too far.
For sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I think there's different philosophies with grinding, but I feel like we probably have the same one where I think I just will argue all day long that grind is some of the best meat for your body,
Oh yeah.
for the animal, for the utilization of it. But I mean, like when I'm grinding stuff, it's like, oh yeah, I want that tendon in there. I want that connective tissue. I
Sure.
want that cartilage. I want
Yeah.
that fat.
I mean,
It's
all that collagen that
everything.
comes with it, right? It's just so good
Yeah,
for you. It's good for your nails, your eyes, everything. I
absolutely.
mean, I think it's the source of life right there. And so with those grinds, like you said, you can get away with some of those things that you wouldn't just pop in your mouth or
Right.
you couldn't even cook on the sizzle pan or whatever you want to do with it. You just be chewing on that thing for hours. So
Absolutely.
grinding it, it's great.
Yep. And if
Yeah.
you're in doubt, then double grind it.
Yeah, there you go.
Just
Exactly.
even do it again.
Yeah.
No, I'm glad we're on the same page with that. So we get this question a lot with hunters that come out and they're just super stoked and they want to go back to the cabin. They want to cook something that night from the animal.
Right.
What are your options for like best eating experience night one?
Night one.
Because it's not going to be your ribeye.
No.
Don't do it.
No, don't do your ribeye. You want those things to bleed out and you want to give them some time. I mean, I've seen people even like cut the back straps out and try to get after that. And I'm like, no, give that some time too.
Yeah, gets
You
better.
know? But like with a deer, you could get into the tenderloin, right? And if you really want to eat some meat, you can chop that up and make a nice tartare with it with some mustard and raw onion. And if you got some nice pasture raised eggs, egg yolk on there. Big fan of the heart, like I was telling you. We always make a tartare out of it. But I usually do like a more Mexican style kind of fresh lime and things like that. With the pico de gallo and avocado. With liver, that's another one that people love. The way I like to do it is cook some bacon and then fry that with bacon and onions and just chop that up. But the best with all that stuff is to do it over an open fire, right? On the campfire. It just feels normal. It feels right. So those are the cuts that I always go after.
Dang.
Right.
That sounds so good. I think, yeah, these are the cuts that I would suggest too. I always recommend heart
Yeah.
first. And I think a lot of people probably have never really eaten a heart and they might think that sounds a little bit odd, but to my understanding, a heart is like closer to a muscle than an organ. And if you cut it right,
Yeah.
I mean, you'd be mistaking it for like a tenderloin
Right.
or like a fillet or something like that.
Yep.
I
I
mean,
mean, it almost looks like really good tuna.
yeah,
know?
yeah. I
Yeah.
wonder if you could do like poke or
Well, that's kind of like what the style we do, right? So it's like
Dang.
chop that thing up bite size and fresh pico with onions and serranos and lime juice, sea salt,
Absolutely.
and just some kind of crunch to go with it, right? If it's a sweet potato chip or a good beef tallow chip or something
Yes.
like that.
All the organs are so good fresh off the animal.
Right.
Like as warm as it's coming off. Like don't ever, if you can consume them without ever having to refrigerate them, the quality, the texture, the taste is just all day long better. And we've had liver where we'll eat it raw and just say, this is the best thing we've ever eaten. This
Right.
tastes like a freaking honey crisp apple. And then put it in the refrigerator and 12 hours later, go back to it.
It's
and it's
different.
completely different.
Right.
It's like the texture is different. It's slimy. It's
Uh-huh.
has those characteristics of liver that typically turn people
Yeah.
off. And so, yeah, I think the key of what you're kind of tapping into is like eat your organs first. They're
Yeah.
the most nutrient dense, but they're also the most
Yeah, you don't want
flavorful.
those things hanging out in your fridge for 5-6 days.
Yeah.
It's not going to be the same.
You're not going to want to age
And you're probably
those.
not going to want your next heart. Yeah.
For sure. Do you ever eat any of that stuff raw off the animal? Just
I have. Yeah. We like I said, we eat it raw. Sea salt, always the way to go. Something,
Sure.
right? But I'm a texture eater. So I like to eat it with some kind of crunch. Kind of helps the palate, but it's all delicious.
That's so neat.
I'm not a big fan of kidneys though.
Yep.
Yeah.
Have you done testicles raw?
Yeah, I've done them with you.
Yeah, I was just making sure you remembered. They're so good, right?
It was my favorite cut
I
that
mean,
day. And
yeah.
it was hard to talk to people about that. Like, what would you like the best? I like the testicles the best.
Yes,
Yeah.
the nuts.
Yeah.
I'm with you, dude. I don't know how to
They were like
explain 'em.
buttery and I don't know. It was good stuff.
Buttery,
Yeah.
oyster-like.
There you go.
I don't know if did we do bone marrow that day raw?
Didn't do bone marrow.
Okay.
No.
That's just your straight up Kerrygold deep dark orange
How do you
butter
do
right
that?
there.
Do you just scoop it and put it in the mouth? Or
You
do
can
put it on
absolutely do
something?
that.
Yeah.
Yes. Because like all the beautiful thing about all these cuts we're talking about eating raw is that coming out of the animal, like they're all enveloped in connective tissue and
Right.
between other muscles. So like from a sanitary perspective, fresh, it's never had contact with anything that could cross contaminate it.
Right.
And a healthy animal.
Well, it makes a lot of sense.
And so yeah, all day long they're like designed to be eaten. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of the accounts of like the Comanche Indians, I mean, they're just getting after the raw organs. And even if you just watch a freaking pack of wolves take down an elk at
First thing
Yellowstone,
they're going after, man.
yeah, they're
Yeah,
not going
they
after
know. Yeah.
the prized cuts of modern palates.
I mean, it's like a tomato, right? Is it better off the vine or 7 days later, right? Same
Yeah.
thing.
Oh,
It all
same
makes sense.
same thing all day. Yeah, and there's something to learn probably from that too about just being patient. With the things that do get better over time, it's like, I mean, I love eating a good ribeye
Yeah.
or tenderloin as anyone else, but, like, in my head, like, the temptation is always just to, like, get to it a little too soon,
Yep.
but it's like waiting for Christmas morning as a little kid. You just have to
You're right.
it just teaches you that, like, there's this rhythm and this cycle that we're
Right.
all a part of, and
Right.
no matter how much you wanna cheat the system.
And it's all about the process, right? And that's what it all comes down to. It's just like after that animal's on the ground, that's when all the fun starts, and when you get to eat, cook, break it down, and all that kind of stuff.
Yep. I think, I mean, eating wild game, whether it's elk or pronghorn or bison, I mean, those are all venison. Those are my favorite meats on the planet. So I'm with you on this. When you look at a carcass, this is something I'm not good at. But from a chef perspective, how do you think about looking at the whole carcass and deciding what the right ways to cook different cuts are?
Yeah, I mean, being in the restaurant business so long and breaking down the animals and just cooking with them, some of these pieces of meat just need longer time, right? Time is everything. So I mean, you've got your tenderloins, your back straps, you can cut some hams off, but once you start getting into the shanks and the necks and you know pieces of shoulder, like those are going to take longer to cook. So then that, like I said, getting back to the fun of it, like just knowing that you have all these different things that you get to cook, I don't know, it fires me up, right?
Yeah.
And then all the grind that comes with it. Um, so I mean, obviously, these days you can look at something and it could tell you how to cook like a whole butchered animal.
Right.
So I think that's a good way to start if you're not familiar with the way the animal is broken down.
Sure.
But yeah, every piece is gonna be cooked differently.
So, like, for me, I can identify the probably like 20% of the cuts because
Right.
there's a lot of freaking cuts in there if you really want to get
Yeah.
into it.
Yeah. I don't think I know them all.
Um, and so, but I can definitely like look at a cut and I can say, yeah, this one I'm gonna call that a roast.
Yeah. There you go.
This one I'm gonna call that a steak.
Uh-huh.
And so, like, if you just kind of eyeballing these big whole cuts of meat, like from maybe like the shoulder or the hindquarters, like, and you're just generically calling it a roast,
Yeah.
how would you approach like cooking something like that? Say based off of some red meat.
Yeah. These longer cooks, and it depends on the animal, right? So like with pig, I like to brine it, dry it, and then, cook it for a really long time on those cuts. Other meats, I mean, I think for the average cook, I think having a crock pot goes a long way. Um, I like to cook meats and get them, and this is like a kitchen thing, just getting them to where they are. So braising them for hours and hours, cooling them off. And then when it's time to cook, you're like, it's not taking 3 hours, right? Like you're just cutting it up, a ripping hot grill or a saute pan with some beef tallow and just cooking that stuff up, making tacos or, braising short rib and reheating that stuff up.
Yeah,
And, you can cook those things way ahead of time and have meal prep, right? So you could say, hey, I want to eat these short ribs on Thursday
yeah,
and I have time on Monday because I'm off that night and the kids at school or whatever. And like you can braise that thing. And then when it comes down to your Thursday when you get home and things are all chaotic, it's like you're just heating that thing up. A
yeah.
little bit of stock or the jus from whatever you braised it in, heating that thing in the oven. You've got a delicious meal there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so convenient.
Yeah.
That's the way to do it, or to feed larger groups too.
Yeah. 100%.
Like you don't have to cook a bunch of individual cuts.
Yeah.
Um,
I just feel like when you look at cooking, you should plan it out, right? You should have a game plan. You shouldn't just pull this thing out of the freezer and be like, "All right, we're eating this tonight."
that
I mean,
doesn't
with a
work too well.
ribeye or something like that, obviously you can get away with that. But these
Yeah,
other cuts, it's like have a game plan, find a recipe, have fun with it. You did all this to make it happen to get it to your freezer. Now take the time to cook it. Make it
yes,
delicious.
yeah.
Do justice to that animal.
And the leftovers from these kind of like
Oh,
slower cooked
dude,
things are just legendary. Like they get
legend.
better
Yeah.
with time. And even a roast for me, like I'll eat it in that current state that I cooked it, and then like 2 or 3 days later, I'll just start shredding it up and
Make
dicing it
some
and pan
taco,
frying.
right? Exactly.
Yeah, and it's like carnitas, and they crisp up. It's
Oh
like,
man,
dude, what
making my
am I
mouth water right
eating?
now thinking about that.
Yeah, I'm telling you, man. I know we speak the same
But I
love
think yeah,
language.
that's the process.
Yep. Man, Morgan from Force of Nature and House Chef
Right.
had posted this recipe last year online where he was like showing people how to cook bison ossobuco,
Right.
which is going to be like, I guess it's just a shank of
Yep.
an animal
Yeah.
cross-cut,
Shank or back shank. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so it was so simple, but it just was like so seasonally perfect because you put it in this broth. You have some like really fresh vegetables that you're putting in there, some high quality sea salt, and then you're stepping away for like 4 or 5 hours.
That's it.
And
Let
then
the oven do all the work, man.
yeah, and then like these cuts, these like gelatinous tendons and this stuff you could never have imagined eating just melts off the shank or the ossobuco, and
So good.
it's like the best part of the whole experience.
And it's
But
so good for you.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I was even thinking like medicinal and seasonal. Like I crave those types of meals during the winter when
Dude.
like colds are going around,
Yeah.
kids are sick,
Yep.
everyone has the sniffles. It's
Yep.
just like
A braised
feels so
short
right.
rib or a shank or a pot roast, something like that. It's like your body craves it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's like the seasonal wisdom
Yeah.
of
But with that, it's like, you're taking this high quality meat. So you want to put high quality ingredients with it, right? Like you said, the sea salt, you want to be making your own stock. Maybe it's from that animal or you made some chicken stock and then you're putting organic vegetables in there and cooking that all together and letting it all kind of get together. I think it's pair them up with things that equal that.
yes. The ingredients I kind of wanted, yeah, talk to you about like leveling up the quality. One of the biggest mistakes I see with people eating game that they harvested, wild game in general, is like they'll just like if they're making sausage or they're gonna get it ground, they'll
Right.
just put in some like commodity, like 50 cents a pound pork fat, like
Right.
industrial suffering pig fat in it. And you're just like took this perfect creation of nature, which is like your deer or your elk, and then you just totally desecrated it with like this
I know, man.
factory farm
Yeah. Either that or some
system.
kind of shitty beef fat, right? It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, no, man.
There's a disconnect.
There's a disconnect big time, and with sausage, I agree 100%. Like find some pasture raised pork, get that fat cap. You don't want all the leaf lard. You want a little bit harder fat because it's going to grind better and not get all melty on you.
Yep.
So I'm 100% agreeing with you there.
Where can you find like high quality
I mean, talk
beef
to
fat or pork
talk
fat?
to the local market, the farmer's market, and just give them a heads up. Hey, I'm going on a hunt. If I get lucky, obviously, but set it up. And these people are trying to get rid of this stuff. A
Yes.
lot of this, they're just not selling slabs of fat to people at the market. So it's like they love that, right?
Dude,
Or
that's a secret right there.
yeah,
You're
for
right.
sure. Yeah, having that connection, and that's what it all goes back to, right? It's just resources. I think we all need to resource better.
Yes.
Yeah.
You've sent me over some recipes that I've asked you to share, and yeah, you always like are very specific. Like whenever the ingredients are listed, it's like the salt. You never just put salt.
No,
You're like high quality sea salt
or
or
really good olive oil.
yeah, or
Right,
you're
right,
like
yeah.
extra virgin olive oil.
Don't F it up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's like very specific. Like what is okay? So that is important, but like what is it with salt, man? I feel like salt is the most holiest of ingredients to cook
People have
meat
wars
with.
over that stuff, right? I love salt, and we eat a lot of it. And I like to source it from all over the world, right? And you can find it online so easier. Like we get this gray salt from France that is just amazing, and you feel better when you eat it. All the minerals and things like that. I think I was telling you about a bag of salt that I bought offline from a podcast on Paul Chek's thing. He had a lady on talking about salt, and it was like the power of the sea. I forgot the name of the salt bag, but they were saying they found nutrients and minerals from there that are from like outer space,
Wow.
It's just like so much in that,
Yeah.
and
That's-
we've been told not to eat salt, right?
Right.
It's like, what the fuck?
Yeah. And not to eat the red meat that you're
Yeah,
putting the salt on.
exactly, man.
But it's all backwards.
But, sourcing and finding those ingredients, food should be fun and it should be healthy. And it's just digging in a little bit, buying an extra step above what you're going to find at the grocery store, right?
Yep. You might do the same thing, but the circles that we tend to run with from time to time, like if my family goes on vacation,
Right.
we'll just bring a bottle of salt.
Dude,
Or like
that's
we're not
that's
messing
my
around.
move, bro.
Yeah. Because like you're saying, it's just like such an important ingredient. But a lot of the information out there with cooking wild game, I feel like it's outdated or it's just like has this weird, like it's not connecting with the modern hunter, like the more conscious consumer. And like there's a lot of like weird, like use pink curing salt and like
Right.
all these bullshit preservatives that,
Uh-huh.
especially like sausage making.
Right.
Which I think sausage making, we should talk about that because that's a really fun way to get creative, have fun with your food, and
Yeah.
utilize the whole
And
animal.
get everybody involved, right? Takes a
Yes,
group to do it. I mean, you could do it by yourself, but it's so much fun, more fun when you got a group of people in there with all their different recipes and everybody's busting out different links and things like that.
absolutely.
Yeah. No, I agree. What you're putting in there, right? You want organic spices, right? These days, like hot peppers are on the dirty dozen now. How scary is that,
Yeah.
right? You know, just spray with glyphosate. And you don't think about that. You're like, okay, maybe I'll buy an organic bell pepper or a jalapeno that's organic, but then you go buy some paprika or something like that. That's not organic,
Right.
right? So digging in there, like you said, the fat that goes in it. When it comes to sausage making, I think it's 25%, fat. So like 1 to 4, like
Yep.
fat ratio. That's what I've always gone by.
There you go.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think this. I mean, this is something that we're really passionate at in my household, which is like the the um the dried seasonings,
Yeah.
especially like the paprika and the peppers, like making sure that those are organic. And one of the other considerations, in addition to like what chemicals do I not want to be putting into my food or my body, but it's like all those organic dried spices, they dried spices have to be treated. There has to be multiple steps to ensure food safety.
Right.
And some of those steps, one of them, most common one, is like irradiating the food itself. And so, like literally exposing that spice to radiation to
Right.
nuke every damn thing in it, on it, that was ever a part of it.
Yeah. It's a time thing, right?
Yeah, that's sketchy. The other idea is you can treat it with chemicals. It's like another type of pest management, anti-biocide. It's like a biocide treatment where they basically fumigate the dried seasoning. So
Right.
again, like you don't want that on your body, your loved ones. So yeah, I'd say really pay attention to that.
I think so too. I mean, it just goes back to like how wheat, with glyphosate, how they found out it dries it out before they harvest because sometimes rain will come in or it gets moist and kind of pushes them back on their yield, and spraying those chemicals on there, they found out just dries it out. It doesn't
Yes.
grow anymore. It's dead.
Yep.
It's easier to produce and get in a bag and get to the consumer faster. So, it's important. I feel like everybody should dig in a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, with sausage making, I mean, obviously, I think like link sausage making is a little bit more advanced.
Yeah.
Breakfast sausage making, that's like a little bit easier because you don't have to worry about casing and all
Right.
that
Because
stuff.
that's a tough part.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it takes some finesse. It's totally doable
Yeah.
once you like watch one YouTube video or
Right.
have someone show you. I get it. But like breakfast sausage type stuff, how do you go from like having a concept in your head to maybe, is there like an intermediate, a test step before you just make like 30 pounds and trial and
Yeah.
error? Like
No,
how do you
I know
small
what you
batch
mean.
something
Right,
like
right.
that?
I mean, just start off with a little bit of grind, have all your seasonings there and patty it up and fry it up. And you're like, all right, I'm there.
Yeah, so just cook it
It's
up,
it's not
one
hard.
patty.
Yeah.
There you go.
Don't go crazy. Like you said, you don't want to get into 30 pounds and be like, oh, this is the saltiest thing I've ever had. Right.
Yeah,
Or, it's falling apart because I didn't get enough things in there or whatever it is. So spending that just quick second, just tasting it. Like if you're making a meatball, right? Before you patty them all up, you're probably frying a little piece
absolutely.
just because it's delicious anyways, and knowing what you're getting into.
Yep. I've always been a little bit weird in the way that I just love mixing fruit and meat, especially wild game. So like venison or bison or
Okay.
elk. Like I love getting grind. So like this morning I had ground bison ancestral and I put bananas on top and then
Oh,
just
wow.
like mixed it. But like when I'm doing sausages too, like I love putting dried fruit in there. So like
Yeah.
mangoes is top of the list, blueberries is top of the list.
Cranberries are good.
Cranberries are great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think there's something too about thinking outside of just you got your meat and you got your seasonings and maybe like some veggies, but you can put like incorporate fruit.
For sure.
You can incorporate like sometimes I'll do like shallots or little diced onions
Yeah,
or green
100%.
onions,
Yeah.
things like that.
I mean, herbs are good, right? Sage and thyme, all those herbs go a long way, especially if you're doing the breakfast sausage. Like having that sage in there, I think is what the taste should be
That's critical,
Yeah. for breakfast sausage. Yeah.
huh? So okay, so then I mean, this is just making me so hungry thinking about all this, and it's making me really excited about whitetail season, which is coming up
Right.
so soon. But best, so we kind of talked about like cooking a meal that night, focusing on organs. But if you're gonna like take that wild game, just for the sake of this conversation, let's just say it's a deer. Even though I think like you could cook a deer and an elk and a pronghorn and a bison very similarly. Like
Yeah.
maybe like pig or wild turkey's kind of different. So we'll say you're like red meat. You're gonna really like do something super cool with that animal right now. Because I know you're like always looking at recipes, but like right now, if you're like, man, I gotta create a menu for my friends and family off of this deer or red meat, what's that gonna be?
Right. I mean, one of my go-tos, like after a hunt, what I like to do is like a take on like a carne asada, right? So I take those cuts and those pieces of meat that are a little bit more lean, that take a little bit longer, and I'll marinate them and throw them on the Traeger and smoke them, get them all the way cooked, cool that off. And then I like to dice it up, throw that in with the potatoes and corn or carrots and celery and garlic, bunch of stock and some good paprika and garlic, and let that all cook down. And the potatoes will kind of thicken that stock up. So you have like a stew. And then we'll get some organic tostada chips and build these things, these big tostadas with pico, and then you got like pickled radishes and whatever else you have around. And kind of having this like tostada bar. And that it's always a hit. Right. And it's a good way to showcase the animal. It kind of loses a little bit, but you get these big chunks of just meat that are delicious.
Yeah.
With all those spices. That's one of my favorite things to do for
Yep.
sure. Yeah.
That sounds awesome. I wouldn't say that loses either. I'd say that like compliments or
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because to me, if I saw that meal laid out, I would still be like, yes, the meat is the focus.
Yeah,
That's
because
what
you're
I'm
leaving
most
big
excited
chunks in
about.
there, right? So it's like eating that pot roast kind of while you're eating it.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
And then everything else. And that's kind of how we think about designing meals at our house. Like when Katie and I are really hungry, we'll just be like, what do you want for dinner? And she's not asking me, I'm not asking her, like, what sides do you want?
right.
We'll figure that out. But we're always saying, like, what meat do you want to eat tonight?
Uh-huh.
And then once we agree on that, we'll like creatively jazz it up.
Right.
But in our house, it doesn't get as elaborate as your creative capacity. We'll just typically do like Japanese sweet potatoes and then some wild game,
Dude,
sea
I
salt.
mean, we are, meat, some kind of potato maybe, a kale salad. That's like all the time for us.
Yep.
You know what I mean? That's just what we go to with the salsa verde, right?
Yep.
And
Oh
just get
yeah.
after it, right?
AP salsa verde. Dude, I made that again this week. That
Did
is
you?
your
I
signature
love it,
thing.
man. I love
Oh,
it.
it's on
Yeah.
fire at my
Yeah.
house. Okay. Let's wrap this up with why is the process of procuring and preparing your own meat important to you?
You know, I just feel, and I don't know where this could start or how we get back to it, but growing your own vegetables, watching an animal die, catching a fish, whatever it is, right? Just leads people to not waste as much. So that's where I immediately go, right? Once you're involved and you see it and you're not disconnected from it, I think that's what it's all about. So that's how I look at it because you know how much time it took, you know the life of the animal, you met the animal, all that. And I just feel like this world would be so much better if people were connected a little bit more, right? Or look, if you don't want to shoot it, maybe your neighbor is a hunter and you're like, hey man, I'll split it with you, right? And then that neighbor also knows what you had to do to get it back to him. He's not going to waste as much, and they're going to try to create really good meals with this. I working in the restaurant, I don't know how many times I would see a $120 tomahawk come back halfway eaten. You know what I mean? Like that breaks my heart.
Brutal.
Or like we'll send a steak out and it's a little overcooked or a little undercooked. It's like, hey, we could take that up for you. No, we want a brand new one. That thing's just going in the trash because they just are not connected to what that took to raise that animal. And it just goes with anything. I think once you tap into that, you'll start appreciating everything around you, right? Knowing what it took and seeing something that's about to be rotten and it's like, okay, let's cook that before it just completely goes and sits in your refrigerator for 2 weeks because you just keep looking at it, right? So I don't know, that's where my head goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful, man. I think you're describing like participation versus just being a spectator
Dude.
and you're walking the walk. So I appreciate that. You're going dove hunting
Yeah.
after this.
Yeah. Head out there right now, man.
You're the real deal.
Yeah, hopefully we get lucky, supposedly they're flying good, but yep, cooler's packed, ready to go.
Good.
Yeah, man.
Well,
Appreciate it.
yeah, thank you so much for joining us, sharing some of your wisdom. If you had to suggest maybe some other resources for people to dive in a little bit deeper, some cookbooks that are maybe specific to wild game that you just love, that have changed your life, maybe that'd be a good resource to leave people with.
Yeah. I mean, Jesse Griffith's book, A Field, is great, right? It's always a fun one to read. There's so many out there. I mean, just watch a meat eater, get you kind of excited. Just Googling things, looking at things. I don't know. There's just so many resources now that weren't back in the day. So I think there's just 100 ways to approach it. But yeah, I think getting your hands dirty is the way to go.
Cool.
Yeah,
Trial and
brother.
error. Make
Yeah,
up
man.
your own recipes. Right on, man. Well, thank you so
Thank
much.
you, sir.